the things I'm looking at are changes in partisan voter registration. And I looked at what's happened to the changes in voter registration data since Donald Trump was inaugurated as president, because theoretically, since January of 2017, if some of the pundits are correct, you would expect to see a wave of Democratic voter registration. I did not see that. I have seen 1 million less Democrats registered to vote, 570,000 less Republicans registered to vote, and an uptick of 416,000 independents. So in other words, from that standpoint, no Democratic wave. The second thing that I think is worth looking at is what I generically refer to as party enthusiasm. What I saw happening in Illinois and Texas was that Democratic participation increased 119% relative to the 2014 midterms. Republican participation increased 4%. So from that standpoint, when you're talking about partisan enthusiasm, I am clearly seeing evidence of Democrats being more enthusiastic about voting than Republicans, which means that you can theoretically talk about the W word, wave. Wayne Gretzky once said that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Accordingly, another thing I like to look at when we're talking about party enthusiasm is that in 35 states thus far, qualifying has closed for congressional primaries. Louisiana's, of course, were the last in the nation in mid-July. But in those 35 states where filing has closed, what I have seen happen is that 99% of 212 Republican seats have a Democratic competitor. 80% of 154 Democratic seats have a Republican competitor. In other words, what's going on is nearly every Republican-held seat has a Democratic challenger, but 20% of Democratic-held seats are basically skating on Election Day. So when you have that degree of Democratic enthusiasm going on where they're contesting nearly every Republican-held seat, in my book I call that evidence of party enthusiasm, and the fact that they're competing for those seats means that they may be able to pick up some that they would not have had they left those seats alone. Thus the Wayne Gretzky mark. The other thing, again, when you're talking about things I'm looking at, this is actually point number 3 with regards to data points that are or are not indicative of a party wave. I look at the metric of congressional retirements. The thing I've seen about politicians is that, or politics in general, it's a very psychologically driven profession, meaning that either the fear of what you saw just happened in a past election or the fear of what may happen in an upcoming election typically forces incumbents' hands in terms of retirement. Along those lines, what I'm seeing happening thus far, and keep in mind, this is with only 35 out of 50 states where congressional filing has closed, I'm seeing a record number of congressional retirements of 39 Republicans and 17 Democrats. The Democratic number is typical. 39 Republicans, that's a record. I've not seen numbers that high for some time. The last time I saw them even close was in 2008 when Republicans, after coming off of a big defeat in the 2006 midterms and faced with the prospect of a Barack Obama-led wave in 2008, decided to retire en masse. The fourth factor when we're talking about what I see as happening this fall in the midterm elections are, I'm looking at the special elections that have occurred thus far, because there's been pretty much ever since the spring of 2017 a series of special congressional elections, with 2 more to come this fall, one in Ohio and one in Texas. What I've seen happen is that in those congressional special elections, the Republican congressional candidate has run 6 to 9 percentage points behind what Donald Trump received in the 2016 presidential election. The reason that that number is particularly significant is that increasingly I have seen more and more evidence of straight ticket voting, meaning that the way a person votes in a presidential race typically is how he or she is going to vote in down ballot races such as Congress. So if we're having a significant drop-off in support for these congressional Republicans, that to me is indicative of bad things to come in November. And let me give you some statistics just to illustrate to you what I think is, from the Republican standpoint, bad. Right now, you have 42 House Republicans who are sitting in seats where Donald Trump got less than 50% of the vote. So if you do the simple mathematics, less than 50% of the vote takes 6 to 9 more points off of even that low number. That's pretty bad. Furthermore, 107 Republicans are sitting in seats that Donald Trump got 56% of the vote or less, while 139 Republicans are sitting in seats where Donald Trump got 59% of the vote or less. Only a handful of Democrats are similarly impacted in terms of sitting in seats where Donald Trump received a majority of the vote. Those handful of seats are in Minnesota and Pennsylvania. Now, one of the things that has been bandied about, and my job is either to prove or disprove it here today, people think that the Republican Senate is rock solid and nothing can happen to it because of the fact that you have 3 times as many Democrats up for re-election as you do Republicans. Well, to tell you the truth, when I look at the individual races that are going on, I personally see 6 to 7 Republican seats that are vulnerable. And the reason I'm saying 6 to 7 is, with all due respect to Senator John McCain, we do not know if that's going to be another open seat this fall given his condition. On the Democratic side, I see 7 seats that are potentially vulnerable. The way I look at those seats, however, is that in each one of those situations, either the Republicans are self-immolating or the Democrats are adequately funded or running strong campaigns. So in other words, I'm not necessarily expecting in the United States Senate that you would have a substantial pickup of Democratic-held seats. At best, maybe 1 to 2, but given that you have 6 to 7 vulnerable Republican seats, I think it is certainly part of the dialogue that the Republicans could lose control of the U.S. Senate in addition to the U.S. House come this fall.